Welcome to the Thunderdome Puckcast. It's your host, Moose. Next week of Lightning action is upon us. Let's talk about part one of the road trip. Let's hit that intro. All right, everybody, good evening. It is Moose solo project, the Thunderdome Puckcast, where we're hoping to touch upon your latest source for Lightning news. I know we're a little behind today. Couldn't get to the most recent episode until just now. Again, I was out of town. If you hadn't seen Bucking Hangover, both Mike on vacation and I was getting back from South Bend, Indiana, watching Notre Dame and USC. So I'm happy to be back in the $10 Sports Man Cave getting content out to you. So tonight, I'm going to talk about Brayden Point's return and how important that is to the Lightning, and we'll go over the first three games of the road trip thus far. Game 4 actually happening earlier tonight, with the Lightning coming away with a pretty solid 3-1 victory in Montreal, where we always seem to have a problem playing. So thankfully, we were able to pull away a victory. But we're just going to cover Carolina, we're going to cover Toronto, and we're going to cover Ottawa. And then, of course, our initial road trip thoughts. This is a tough road trip. I mean, we talked about it last week on the Puckcast, where this was just a very unfortunate placement, I guess, of a tough road trip to start the year. I mean, before we even got the cylinders going, I think we've only had one home game, our home game against the Panthers, and then we've been on the road down in Sunrise. We were home for like a resting period before we traveled and set off on our basically our Atlantic road trip, meeting all the Canadian teams along with Carolina. So the big news, of course, coming out of Lightning camp or Lightning headquarters is Brayden Point is back. He's been back, I think, for over a week now, returning for the Toronto game. So again, big news. Lightning really have looked up and down, in and out of sync. So I'm hoping that this is the final piece of that puzzle that gets them to consistency. But as you'll see when we talk about some of the three games, we are still far from consistent, especially when you consider our start against the Florida Panthers. Both games against the Panthers are home and home, and kind of a different result that we saw from one night to the other. So we're happy Brayden's back. The big news when he was signed, of course, that JBB gave us was that, yes, we signed Brayden Point, but he had some surgery over the offseason, which somehow stayed hush-hush. That was really interesting. And so he had surgery, but he may not be ready till late October or early November, which put him out for potentially the first 10, 12 games of the season. But he was able to make an early return, and again, returning against Toronto, almost scoring a hat trick. He had a handful of opportunities to finish off the hat trick. Spoiler alert again before we get to the Toronto segment. But 2 goals for Brayden Point in his return. The team looked like itself in that game, which is really the most important part, I think, to Lightning fans is, wow, we're looking like the team, that wrecking ball of a team that we had last year. So we're happy to have you back, Brayden Point. Please stay healthy. Please stay healthy, the rest of the team. So if we're kind of fitting as we get into the Carolina game, want to show off the jersey of the night. Again, potentially one of the greatest hockey logos to ever have existed. And I was happy to snag one of these, a Ronnie Francis Whalers jersey. Let me show you the Whalers logo, one of my favorite logos in sports. So you'll see the big W and the H, very creative. I always played as the Whalers growing up, even having like NHL 94, 95. We always played as the Lightning, but loved playing against the Whalers. And even as they transitioned out and moved over to Carolina, always was a fan of Whalers lore, the brass bonanza, playing in the mall, all those great memories, especially with the Lightning being the last game that they played as an organization before moving to Carolina, a tie. And then kind of a strange thing that they have in common, Rick Peckham, the current Lightning play-by-play announcer on Sun Sports, actually started his career in Hartford as their play-by-play guy, so kind of a weird connection there as well. So getting into the Carolina game, this was a game I feel that we saw a little bit while we were going through our inconsistent spell last year. And it's always those puzzling games where the Lightning just get outworked somehow. I don't know if they underestimate the competition or maybe we just took a night off. I always am baffled by games like this where we were literally outshot almost 4 shots to every one we took. I think the final numbers for the Carolina game, the Hurricanes were in the 40s. Yeah, it was 44-13. So we basically got tripled up. So 3-1. We got tripled up on shots. Power play, I think, was one of my concerns. And keys to our season that we talked about, maybe in episode 1 and episode 2, is we knew without question we should have a top power play unit. Maybe not the number 1 unit like we had last year. We had a lot of things clicking right for us last year, but it's the penalty kill that really sets you aside because you're able to quell that temporary momentum that a team gets from getting a power play and the crowd's all into it. So for me, having an effective PK is just as important as having a top-notch power play unit. So again, I'd be happy with us just having a top 10 power play unit, but if we're in the top 3 of the penalty kill, I think that leads to success. So looking at the Carolina game, again, kind of a weird game where Curtis McElhinney made his first start of the year and absolutely stood on his head. I mean, without him, this game could have been out of hand real easy. And again, case of the strange game, right? The Lightning actually had I want to say a 3-1 lead in this game, only amounting to 13 shots all game. I want to say they were at 3 goals by the time they hit 7 or 8 shots. And I think they scored all 3 goals in the first period. So they had a 3-1 advantage. Yeah, that's right. The Hurricanes went up 1 goal, and then Lightning scored 3 straight to end the first period, and then the Panthers kind of came back, tied the game up, and won in overtime. First win of the year, I think, for Peter Mazarek. Didn't know they moved on from the Scott Darling era has come and gone for the Carolina Hurricanes. It seems I was doing some research, and Scott Darling is currently a free agent out there. So kind of a big signing. Forget if it was trade or a signing with Scott Darling leaving the Hawks a year or 2 ago to come be the primary goaltender in Carolina, and it not working out. I think they're rolling with Peter Mazarek, and did they pull James Reimer away from Florida, I think, with them getting Bobrovsky? I think that's what happened. I think they're rolling with Mazarek and James Reimer. A nice sip of bourbon and Coke. So looking at the stats, and we'll post those up on the screen now for your viewing pleasure. Really what we want to look at, again, it's that penalty kill. 2 out of 5, 60% is not going to get the job done most nights. And face-off circle, we talked about it. If you just look at 2 stats, shots even, you can ignore shots a little bit, though you want to pay attention to the pretty distinct advantage they had here. But face-off percentage and power play efficiency or penalty kill efficiency are going to tell you how successful the chances you're going to be successful in the game. And Lightning really lacking in both areas. So again, more often than not, if you're losing the face-off circle, especially as you get into 60% range, you're going to be behind the 8 ball most of the night. And wow, 21 blocks. So you're looking at potentially over 60 shots attempted by the Carolina Hurricanes. This was a game I didn't get to watch. I was out and about, unfortunately, so kind of getting the updates on my phone and watched some of the highlights. So not really our strongest game. Again, when you're having Kuch, Stamkos on the ice, and not really kind of at a -1 here, and Stamkos with a goal. I think it was his second of the year. I think he's up to 4-4 now after the Montreal game. So really the big news also is in preparation for Brayden Point's arrival. This was Jamel Smith's last game. I liked line number 4 and the way they were rolling, but I do agree that Jamel Smith was the odd man out, kind of the person that we knew was going to get demoted with people starting to get healthy. So he was sent down to Syracuse, cleared waivers to make room for Brayden Point, of course. So fourth line is looking with Witkowski. I think they put Killorn in there along with Pat Maroon. So it's pretty solid fourth line. I really like it. I think Verhaeghe's been a little bit disappointing. I think he eventually got his first point, but he's getting power play time. Not playing a killer number of minutes or anything, but he's more often than not going to be on your plus side. But really no points yet, no production, at least at this point through the Carolina game. Let's look at the goaltending stats. This was really where the distinction comes into place. Curtis McElhinney, 40 for 44. Great performance by him. Really some tough saves, some Class A opportunities that the Panthers or the Hurricanes had. And again, 3 defensemen scoring goals for him. 3 of the 4 goals, Dougie Hamilton, Pesce, and Slavin with your goals, along with the game winner by Eric. Oh no, Slavin had the game winner. Eric Holla coming up with the second goal for the Panthers. Mazarek making the start. Didn't really test him much. 13 shots all game. It's about 2.5 a period. Maybe 3 a period plus a few for overtime. So 3 including overtime per period. So again, not the Lightning's greatest effort. Sometimes you get stinkers on the road and we're just getting going. So I'm not surprised that this is happening. So what you expect, though, is when you're moving into your bounce back game against Toronto, of course, you expect the bounce back, the true bounce back, and that's exactly what happened, especially with Brayden Point getting into the lineup. Immediate impact. Brayden Point with 2 goals, and to be honest with you, probably could have finished a hat trick multiple times. That would have been great. See a hat trick on his return. But game in Toronto, totally different. It looked like a Wrecking Crew Lightning team that owned most of the 2018-2019 season. And owned Frederik Andersen. When I was watching this game, I was able to watch a good chunk of this game. It was just amazing to remember last year. We really had Bobrovsky's number outside of the playoffs, and then we had Frederik Andersen's number as well. I think we got him pulled twice, at least twice last year in our games against the Leafs. We usually scored 7 goals on Frederik Andersen pretty easily, and Bobrovsky, I think we dropped 2 snowmen, 2 8 spots on the Blue Jackets early in the season, and of course the playoffs were a different story. So Toronto's summary, let's take a look at it on the big screen. Looking at the Toronto scores, a much different game. Lightning owning the shot on goal advantage. Still some trouble in the face-off circle, and giving up 1 power play goal against. Looking good on the power play, 2 for 3. I like the physical game, of course, the hits, and pretty even on blocks and fairly even on shots here. So it was great to see Brayden Point get on the board. And actually, really a back and forth game. Cooch I think Cooch had 2 as well. Yeah, Cooch had 2 goals. The second and 7th goal for the Lightning. Always exciting to see Shattenkirk on the score sheet. I've been a big advocate of him. I know he had a down year or 2 in New York, resulting in his buying out. But he's playing like he has something to play for. And then again, Palat really on my watch list, where we expect a bounce back season from him, and we're getting just that. Really looks like a different player, a lot quicker, and still able to maintain some of that physicality that he needs playing second line minutes. Just needed that clear, get a nice little sip of bourbon there. So great game against the Maple Leafs. They brought the heat as well. They didn't get a particular great and strong game from Frederik Andersen, but their offensive stars came to play with To both Tavares and Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews already at 6, and that's at this point. That was like a week ago. He could probably be up to 8 or 9 goals by now. But Austin Matthews is on fire this year. Getting in front of the goal race. I think James Neal was up there with 8 or 9 last week as well. So I have to check the stats for where we are in the goal and points race. So again, this was a vintage Lightning game. I mean, they controlled the play for most of the game. They had 2 power play goals. They were out shooting the opposition, and they looked great doing it. There were some goals and some style points on there for sure. I think Shattenkirk's goal was a pretty spectacular move, to put in it by Frederik Andersen, and of course some grade A snipes from Kucherov and Brayden Point as well as they got on the board. And I think Brayden Point had a deflection, a really nasty deflection goal as well. So stereotypical Lightning game. Nothing, you can't go wrong with that performance. And then you take a couple days off and you go and play the Ottawa Senators that we are expecting to be the eighth place finisher in the East. And then you go and you lay an egg. Really not a better performance than Carolina, at least, but really unexpected loss. We talked last week how 7 points needed to be the watermark for this road trip, especially during the seasons, for it to be considered successful and be able to keep pace in the division with a tough opening like this, a tough draw, and with a tough schedule for travel. And we're going to have to win that Boston Bruins game coming up. Thankfully, we took care of business today in Montreal, but have to win the Bruins game in order to hit 7 points. We have to outright win or take the W in overtime to hit the 7-point mark on the road trip. And again, that's just to keep pace. Right now, you're looking at the division standings, and again, that is not inclusive of the Montreal game. Lightning are at 5 points. 5 points right now. And again, I know it's early in the season. It's like, game 5. But the points at the beginning are just as important as the points in the end. So we don't want to understate the importance of the Ottawa Senators game, because you remember two or 3 years ago when we missed the playoffs by 1 point, we lost to a couple bad teams. And I'll never forget. I know one of my friends was reporting out. It was a time we were playing it was 2 years ago. We were playing the Arizona Coyotes, and it's a game we lost and we should have had. And lo and behold, that ended up being the difference of not making the playoffs. That was the year we missed the playoffs by like 1 point. So just beating the Coyotes, for instance, that day, Lightning would have made the playoffs. So we got to be careful of dropping these points at the beginning. And I know the schedule is difficult with a fun 2,000-mile plus road trip to start off the year of being away from home for basically 2 weeks. But anytime you go into Ottawa and lose, it's disappointing. Yes, I know they're a National Hockey League team, and any given day, any team could beat each other just because of the skill level in the league. However, you're playing against the oldest goalie in the league, and Craig Anderson has had a phenomenal career, but certainly on the back nine of it. And he had a pretty strong showing. Again, Lightning, I only saw snippets of this game. Not really forced to make too many incredible saves. Lightning again outshot, 34-21, I think was a shot total. Just the offense, I don't know if teams have the tape on us, and I don't know, and we'll kind of get into the road trip thoughts at the end here. So let's look at the Ottawa statistics. Really, Lightning winning in a couple of key areas. So again, we actually took ownership of the face-off circle and have made the adjustments on the power play. I think part of that is that Ottawa probably doesn't have the greatest power play unit, and Lightning going 0 for 4 in the power play as well. Looks like they're 18 penalty minutes aside. It looks like it might have been a little bit of rough stuff. But again, the Senators with 19 blocks. So Lightning, I think were putting pucks towards the net. Whether they were getting through or not was another story. And let's look at the score sheet. There's Andre Palat once again. Goal number 3 for him. He was my number one guy that needed to make the magic happen this year. He's getting it done. Great to see big Luke Witkowski on the score sheet, getting the game tied 2-2, despite our best efforts to really not push the envelope with offense. But this was kind of a revenge game a little for Vlad. One of my favorite prospects kind of growing up. And that was definitely, I think, a trade that definitely needed to be made. Getting him over to the Rangers. Sad to see him go, but it was the right time to let him go. And kind of a little bit of a revenge game for him. 2 goals, including an empty netter at the end of the game to ice the game for him, but scoring the game winner with 3 minutes to go in the game. Let's look at some ice time statistics. Point, Kuch, and Stamkos, of course, leading for our offensive players. Hedman on the ice a lot, along with Sergei. Looked good to see Sergei getting those number 1 minutes. We were wondering if he was going to be sliding in there with Hedman or not. We've seen a couple different iterations. Hedman and Shattenkirk I've liked, but certainly Hedman and Sergachev, especially with 1 or 2 more years of development for Sergei, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with, I'm hoping. Curtis McElhenney's second start of the year, kind of spell it, giving another break to Vasilevsky, especially facing what at least we thought was a weaker team. Fairly good night. Anytime you're over 90%, you certainly give your team a chance to win the game. 30 out of 33 on the save department. And again, giving up that empty net goal towards the end of the game, not going on his stat line. Curtis Anderson, again, 19 saves on 21 shots. Anytime you give your team 90% saves, there's a chance there to win. So good on Craig. Still hanging pretty. I've always liked Craig Anderson. I always get frustrated when Craig Anderson finds a way to beat us, and so on and so forth. So kind of reflecting now on the road trip so far. You'll see the graphic over here. Let's get myself over there. This side is what's left of the road trip. Of course, Montreal finishing up today, Lightning victory, and we'll cover that on our next Thunderdome Puckcast. And then finishing up in Boston, I think Thursday is when we're in Boston. Well, today's Tuesday. Thursday in Boston. Saturday back home finally against the Colorado Avalanche. So road trip thoughts so far. We've seen that inconsistent hockey that we've been a little bit concerned about. We saw some of it happen towards the end of last year, where in the back of my mind, we saw such a dominant team, and we were in the running for this amazing record, and were we going to be better than the Red Wings and the Montreal Canadiens back from the 70s to beat their points and win records. And it was we had some inconsistency that cost us, and maybe we were viewing the world through rose-colored glasses, being so enamored by the team we had in front of us with over 60 wins. But there were some periods of inconsistency that made me uncomfortable, and we're still seeing it. I'm hoping to chalk it up that it's the beginning of the year. We're trying to get some action for Curtis McElhenney. It's a new team, or a new team member that the boys are still trying to figure out how to play in front of, so maybe that's part of it. But I'm really hoping that we pull it off against Boston. Again, getting us those 7 points that I thought would be critical to keep us on pace with what's been going on in the rest of the league. Buffalo off to a hot start. Carolina's been off to a hot start. I think Carolina might be, when we look, I think next week we'll do a little look at the Metropolitan Division. I think Carolina might be, I think safely I had them in my top 3. They might be moving up to 2 or 1. They might give the Capitals a run for their money this year, especially with the way I've seen them play these last 5 games. Going back to look at some of their highlights, they are the old bunch of jerks. They are loving the storm surge after their home games, and I'm loving it too. I think it's great for the league, and I'm happy that hockey's starting to get back in Carolina because, when they were in their heyday in the late 90s and 2000s, that barn was rocking, and I think there's some tough decisions that were made back in the 2000s where they made that incredible playoff run early on in Cam Ward's career, and really they've made the playoffs a couple times since then, and really some lean times really hurting up there in Carolina and Raleigh. So happy to see that. I don't know. I think we're still a few games away to know what we have. I think on paper we have a great team. We're happy to have Brayden Point back, and the team certainly looks like it's clicking a little bit better. I think, I don't know, Ottawa's always a tough place for the Bolts. I think if this game were at Amalie Arena, it would have been a lot different. But for there to have been a Canadian sweep, especially early on in the season, I think that was a little high. That would have been really high expectations. Again, 7 points is a solid performance. That's going to keep us on pace until we're really getting the cylinders going and we're able to get our skating legs under us and start going on runs. And knowing all this, I haven't put any bets on hockey yet, and we'll probably in a couple weeks we'll do some hockey on $10 sports as well. I like doing some pick'ems on hockey, throwing $10 here or there, see what happens. I hit a few last year, but still waiting to figure out our teams who are going to be the most consistent and who's going to give us their best bang for their buck. So that's it for now on the Puckcast. What do we have coming up, though, on Balls, Brews, and Bros? And again, thank you for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't done so, hit that subscribe button. It's probably over here somewhere, so hit that subscribe button for us. And make sure you're giving us a like as well. We'll have $10 sports probably Thursday. Mike should be, Emrod should be joining us for that. Thankfully, no Bucking Hangover this week. If you haven't seen any of the Bucking Hangovers, make sure to check them out. A great Buccaneers reaction and kind of therapy show, if you will, for Emrod and I. Make sure you're checking out $10 Sports for your amateur sports betting advice, and you get to make fun of our terrible picks and how badly we're performing. But we've had a couple good ones in there as well, so make sure to tune into that. And we'll have another Thunderdome Puckcast. Probably get another episode into the weekend as we wrap up the road trip. So we'll summarize Montreal. We'll see how we do against Boston in 2 days. And then we'll likely include the Avalanche game, which is kind of our grand homecoming after kicking off or first face-off of the year back. Oh, man, it was almost like the 5th of October was the last time the Lightning were in Amalie Arena or something like that. So it's been quite a few weeks. They'll finally be back, and we'll cover that in our next edition, episode 5 of the Thunderdome Podcast. This has been Moose, your host. Thank you so much for your time. Again, subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video if you like it with your family and friends. We'd love to see you. Leave some comments for us. We'd love to interact with you. And don't forget to follow me on @$10 Sports on Twitter for your latest picks and your latest sports news and sports-related gifts. And make sure to follow Emrod. He's at Balls, Brews, Bros. At Balls, Brews, Bros all together. And he had a good question on Twitter today. If we could go back in time, would we trade Mariota for Jameis Winston? Would we do that draft differently? And there's been some good conversation on that. So that's it for now. Thank you for listening to the Thunderdome Puckcast. It's been Moose. Have a great night.